lot of tension. I don't know if that's true for any of you. So today, my part of this today is going to be talking about journeying over time with youth and how we can do that well. So some of this is going to be a confirmation of things that you're already doing. Some of this will be reinforcing what Anne-Marie taught us. You're going to hear me say some things that are just a direct reinforcement of what she said about journeying with youth. And maybe a little bit of it will be a new way of viewing your lifestyle as a faithful journeyer. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. I feel like it was early on in my life that God called me to journey soulfully with others. It probably started in my childhood. I'm sure you could point to some things that show that. But I think the biggest thing is that right out of high school, I got accepted into a program where I was trained to be a radiation therapist. Anybody know what that is? Yeah. I treated cancer patients with mega voltage X-rays. And it was a pretty, I'm not gonna lie, it was a pretty serious job for a 17-year-old to start out in. It was only a few weeks after my high school graduation when I started my orientation. And it was a lesson right from day one. And it was a lesson where it was unacceptable to make light of the people that I was meeting. I had to find a way to learn, to take things seriously, to walk alongside them maturely, while also learning a very technical job. But I loved it. It was a beautiful life experience for me to get trained in that, and I worked in it for 5 years before moving on. And it taught me a lot about giving people dignity as I journeyed with them. People who have to be exposed, people whose bodies are in a very uncomfortable place, people who are trying to make sense of tragedy, people who are in immense amounts of pain. So I consider that a grace in my life, that I was afforded the opportunity to learn about journeying with others in that job. And my calling has stayed much the same in that area, journeying with others. So I left radiation therapy. I meandered my way through a few other things. I did some traveling, and eventually I started full-time ministry in Steinbach with YFC. I started out running a one-on-one mentoring program, so again, journeying and inviting mentors to journey with kids. And then eventually I was offered a role with the national staff as the spiritual development coordinator. So really, my job is to journey with you in any way that you need, in any way that is helpful, specifically in the area of your own spiritual development and formation, because I actually believe that you can't lead the way that you are called to lead unless you're taking care of your own soul. So that's a little bit about me. This topic creates some tension for me because I grew up in a pretty conservative church community, and I always felt like a bad Christian. I think I was taught that there was one way to do evangelism, and I wasn't doing it right, and therefore I wasn't cutting it. I also think that it creates some tension because I think that evangelism has been done poorly, and it has been done with good intentions and devastating results throughout history. So it's important. It's important for us to spend time here. There is not one right way to do this, but it's important that we remain open to how God is teaching us to journey with others, teaching us about His story, teaching us how to share His story in truly life-giving ways. I would encourage you, I'm in the middle of a master's in theology right now, and I will tell you what has happened to me in grad school. I started out knowing a little bit, and knowing that there was a lot I didn't know. And 2 years in, I know a little bit more, and I know a whole lot more. I know that there's a whole lot more out there I don't know. So my knowledge has maybe increased a little bit. My knowledge of what I don't know has increased a lot. Okay? That's God's story. We don't get to the end of it. It's too big. It's so big. So dig in to opportunities. Let it transform you, and it will transform others. That's my hope. That's what I do with attention. That's where I put it. It's hopeful for me, but it's uncomfortable. So, in your package of stuff for this day, there is a diagram of the 3 circles. That's blank. And I just did that so that if you are sort of a visual person that wants to fill in things as we go, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the overlap between God's story and my story, or your story, and the overlap between my story and their story. That's kind of where I'm going to go. And if you want to use that diagram, it's there for you to use. The first thing that I just want to talk about with 3 Story is that it's actually a trademarked thing. And so this is the official description of it on the YFC USA website. It says 3 stories about relationships. It's a way of seeing how the relationships we have with other people and God can be connected and grown. We pray that the Lord will help us move into a way of living that seamlessly connects our relationships with others to a God who desires to be known and followed in every area of our lives. No relationship is unaffected by a 3-story approach to life. This is important. 3-story is not an evangelism tool or method. It is who we want to be and how we want to live. In YFC, 3-story is our living operating system. So just as a side note here, we're not talking about a method or a technique. We're talking about a lifestyle. So we're talking about how you interact with your youth, but we're also talking about how you interact with your volunteers, how you interact with your ministry partners, how you interact with your friends, how you interact with the cashier who serves you at the grocery store. It's a lifestyle. And our hope is that it becomes our DNA, knowing that if we seek to abide deeply with Jesus every day and stay saturated in His Word, we will be ready and aware of the opportunities He gives us in a lost world. We focus on the being, and the doing flows from there. Cool? Right. So I'm going to get somebody to just read out these bullet points. So 3-story is about journeying. Somebody want to, maybe we'll start over here. Francois, do you want to start us off and we can just read one each down the road? You can read it from up here if you can see it too. Yeah.
Oh, stories, not steps. Listening, not telling. Honesty, not perfection.
Questions, not answers. Contributing, not controlling.
Hope without judgment.
Holy Spirit, not program.
Process, not product.
Life, not words.
Awesome. It's a good journey. So those circles that overlap, God's story and my story. Our movement towards God's story is about intimacy. We're all on this journey, or we all have the opportunity to be on this journey, to be conscious of it. And I just want to say that it's a heroic journey. So I think sometimes when we talk about being a Christian, we talk about that, how it's like slugging it out. You know, God's not going to make things easy, but He calls us to take up our cross. And those things are true. Don't get me wrong. There's a deep part of the journey, but let's talk about the heroic side of the journey for a moment. The things that you do every day, the places that God takes us, it's a heroic journey, and it's okay for us to own that. However, I was thinking about this, and I thought, there is kind of a picture of that heroic journey that I think describes it. Let me find my clip here. This describes it in a funny way, and takes us. So this would be my suggestion of where we live. We live between the supernatural and the very ordinary.
on our spiritual.
What just happened? Please tell me nobody kissed me. We won. All right, hey. All right, good job, guys. Let's just not come in tomorrow. Let's just take a day. You ever tried shawarma? There's a shawarma joint about 2 blocks from here. I don't know what it is, but I want to try it.
We're not finished yet.
And then shawarma after.
And that's the end of it. So, here's what I think that clip shows us. It shows us that our journey of intimacy with God, it is wonderful. It is deep. It brings us to the mountaintops. But it is also, it leaves us a little bruised. Doesn't it? It leaves us tired out sometimes at the end of the day. It doesn't always feel like a win. Sometimes we just sit around the table, each one. Nobody has much to say. Your journey of intimacy with God is really important, and it's a heroic journey, but it's also a very ordinary journey. So look to the person beside you, stare deeply and awkwardly into their eyes, and say, you are on a heroic journey.
We should go on a heroic journey together. It could end up being a very unique, rare, funny. I feel like we would make a good
The reason that this journey is heroic is because it's taking us from our conversion to maturity. This heroic journey, it didn't end with your conversion. It didn't end when you said yes to Jesus. And it doesn't end for our youth when they say yes to Jesus. This is a journey from conversion to maturity. Conformed to the image of God for the sake of others. That's the intimate journey that we're on with God. He's doing a work in us that brings us to wholeness. When Lisa Sharon Harper talks about shalom, I want to weep. Because there are so many things that are broken. There are so many relationships and ties between things and systems that we exist in and are complicit in that are broken. They shouldn't be that way. But we are on a heroic journey, and God is bringing us to maturity, and He is renewing all things. That's a heroic journey. So, Shane Claiborne has a great quote that I think addresses this. It's quoted by Philip Yancey in his book, Vanishing Grace. As Shane Claiborne says, I am convinced that if we lose kids to the culture of drugs and materialism, of violence and war, it's because we don't dare them, not because we don't entertain them. It's because we make the gospel too easy, not because we make it too difficult. Kids want to do something heroic with their lives, which is why they play video games and join the army. But what do they do with a church that teaches them to tiptoe through life so that they can arrive safely at death? It's good, right?
Yeah.
If you're not on a heroic journey, if you don't know that your journey with God is heroic, they won't either. We lead them there. We teach them. We disciple them into the ways of Jesus, and it's a heroic journey to be on. So So another piece of this moving towards God's story is that we know God and not just about him. It's a first-hand sort of relationship. When we talk to others, when we talk to our youth about God, it's not second-hand, it's first-hand. This is my relationship. And I just want to ask, would you describe your relationship with God as intimate? What makes it so? How does it grow? What does intimacy with God even mean? What does it look like? I'm going to read a fairly long passage from a book by Jean Vanier. This is a great book, by the way. It's kind of like his commentary, his poetic commentary on the Gospel of John. And it's very, very beautiful. But he talks about this idea. He says the Gospel begins with two disciples following Jesus, and it ends with Jesus saying to Peter, "Follow me." They are called to learn from him, to discover little by little who he is, his vision of love, and who they are. They do not always know where he is leading them, but they trust him and walk with him. We too are called to follow Jesus day by day, not always knowing where he will lead us, but trusting in him, seeking to become like him. In Greek, the word to follow not only means to walk in the footsteps of a master, but also to accompany, to be with. For the moment, these 5 men are called to be disciples of Jesus. Later, Jesus will call them friends. The prophets of Israel were chosen by God and sent out immediately. Their call was to be sent. Their mission was clear from the beginning, but for these 5 men, it is not so. Jesus wants, first of all, to form their hearts and minds and attitudes so that they become good servant leaders. We know, however, the difficulties and dangers for those of us who carry any responsibility. We can get caught up in our own need for spiritual power, seeking to protect ourselves. We so easily forget the compassion and humility of Jesus. That is why, before sending forth these men, Jesus wants them to be with him, to dwell with him, and become his friends, so that they do not so much announce a theology or a doctrine, but a person, Jesus, a person they love, a person with whom they have a living relationship, a person who is transforming their lives. Jesus spent about 30 years living the good news in Nazareth with Mary and Joseph before announcing it. We too are called to live and be with Jesus before speaking about him. But how can we speak of him if we do not know him personally? So Jean Vanier is encouraging us that to be with and to dwell with Jesus is a part of our calling. It's an important piece. It's a vital piece. And it is what intimacy is all about. Moving towards God's story, God initiates and we respond. So in this journey of intimacy, I know that you and I probably have friends, and in our friendships, we sometimes feel like we have to be the initiator, when you feel like you have to be the one to pick up the phone and call, or you have to be the one who remembers birthdays, or you have to be the one, and you're kind of in this initiating role. In our journey of intimacy with God, God is always the initiator, and we are always responding. He never stops initiating. We don't always know what he's initiating. We don't always see it. We don't always feel it, but he's always initiating. Thomas Kelly, he says this: in this humanistic age, we suppose man is the initiator and God is the responder. But the living Christ within us is the initiator and we are the responders. God the lover, the accuser, the revealer of light and darkness presses within us. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. And all our apparent initiative is already a response, a testimonial to his secret presence and working within us. Ministry is tiring, right? And I think sometimes we take that into our relationship with God, and we really need to work for it. We have to figure out a way to reconnect. And I do think that our effort is it's important. But I think that this picture of God as the initiator is a relief to me. That really, when it comes down to it, my job is to receive. My job is only to open my hands. Recently I've had this picture of, well, to be honest, I was talking with my spiritual director, and I was telling her that my motto in the weeks before I talked to her had been, just keep swimming, you know, from Dory, from Honeymoon, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep going. And she just paused and she said, maybe in the sea of grace you get to float. So I've been meditating on that picture a lot. What does it feel like when you're swimming in a lake, and then you stop swimming and you just roll over on your back, you stretch out your arms, and you look towards the sky? What does it feel like to float in the sea of grace? That's what Thomas Kelly's talking about. So, our story is a part of how we live out this three-story lifestyle. That's a funny cartoon, maybe. So here's a poem that was written by a youth. Her name's Olivia. Can somebody read this for us? Whoever wants to, just shout it out.
I am not the person I always dreamed I'd be. I am not the person I pretended to be. But I am not the person I will yet be because Jesus loves me and he is renovating my life. Here is the truth. This house is under construction by the master carpenter. So come on in and don't mind the mess. I have nothing to hide, nothing to fear, nothing to lose. My Jesus loves me, and he is not finished with me yet.
Henry Nouwen has written a book called The Wounded Healer. Have you heard of it? That's what this is talking about. You don't have to have it all together. Your story is not finished yet. So in a lifestyle of three-story, you're not looking for end results. You're sharing life. And sometimes sharing life means that you're doing a lot of stuff. Sometimes sharing life means you actually don't have a good answer. I think the pressure sometimes builds up on us in ministry to have all the answers. Am I the only one that feels that way? He's not finished with me yet. So we're going to spend just a couple of minutes, probably only about 5. It's not going to feel like enough. We're gonna partner up and just give you a chance to share your story with each other. Sorry. So it's just an opportunity for you to pull 1 or 2 things from your life, places where God has met you, places where he's been real to you, places that have built your faith, just 1 or 2 that you can remember. Share with a partner and then switch. It's not going to be your whole testimony. We don't have time for that today. But it's a way of practicing, just a place where your story and God's story overlap. That is important to you. Can you do that? Just partner up. We'll have about 5 minutes. I'll tell you about halfway so you can switch. Yay. All right. We got the team. I know scratches the surface, right? Yeah. It just scratches the surface because you have an amazing testimony. The testimony of what God is doing in your life is amazing. God has been at work. How does it feel to talk about the ways that God has shown up in your life? That's awesome, right?
It's life-giving.
It's life-giving. What is it? Yeah, what else?
It's insane how you can see the Holy Spirit change his lives, like in ways of thinking and mindsets, in a minute. How it feels like it can't be changed.
Yeah.
I like how, like, when we were talking, like, one story reminded us of another thing, and another thing, and another thing, and another thing.
Right.
It's almost like you can't stop thinking of them once you start sharing.
Right.
Yeah, I could only think of one, and then Scott shared his, like, short story, and then I could think of another, and I could think of another, and then it just became, like, a whole bunch.
It became a competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm a better Christian, just for the
Who has
record.
better God? Who has better God moments in their life? I like it. But hey, you guys, this is an important practice because it does a bunch of things for us. First of all, it reminds us that God is at work. It reminds us that He's alive in our lives. But it gives us an opportunity to practice what it feels like. And this is like different because you're talking to somebody who's also a Christian and you know they speak your language and that sort of thing. But to practice this idea of where has God shown up in my life? Where are those tie points between God's story and my story? And how would I explain that to a youth who doesn't know Jesus? Because you might use different words. You might use different phrases. You know, you might come at it a little bit differently when you're talking with youth. So practice that with each other. Practice that in your volunteer teams. Every time you have a volunteer meeting, get somebody to share about a couple of God moments. They don't have to share their whole testimony. They don't have to share the whole gospel. What are ways that you notice God showing up in your life, and how would you explain that to a youth that doesn't know Jesus, that doesn't know the church, right? That's how we express. That's how the Holy Spirit gives us words in ways that others can understand it. It's translating, really, is what it is. So thanks for doing that. So movement toward their story. So now we're moving to that point between my story and their story, and I call that space missional relationships. Just so you know, we are probably going to go about 10 minutes into lunch. I know that you're all starving. That's a terribly cruel thing to do. But we'll make up for it on the other end, or we'll just give you lots of good food tonight.
Or just add it.
Yeah. We're just having some time. Exactly. So, missional relationships. So this one, I don't think I can emphasize enough that we learn to be good listeners. You can't journey soulfully with others without listening well. So, does anybody remember what Anne-Marie's, you remember that Mandarin symbol that she put up? Do you remember what is all represented in that symbol? What were the things that were all represented there that she talked about? What listening requires?
The ear, the eye, and one heart.
Yes. The ear, the eyes, the heart, and undivided attention. That's what listening requires, deep listening. And there's a quote that I have no idea where it comes from. My spiritual director was the one who shared it with me. Deep listening is indistinguishable from love. And love heals. If you are willing to bring your ear, your eyes, your heart, and your undivided attention to another, it will bring healing. Because when somebody takes the time and the space to really listen to us, it does that. It does that. It validates. It brings care. It shows us who we are. It lets us know we're worthy and valuable. Learn to listen with your whole person. I've heard a counselor describe this kind of listening as threefold listening. You're listening, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to listen deeply. If you spend a whole drop-in evening listening deeply, unless you are like in a whole other like realm than me, you'll be exhausted after. You should be. It's okay. It's energy well spent. And when we're listening, this idea of threefold listening is really what Three Story is all about. It's at any given time when someone is sharing something with you, you are listening to what they're saying. You're also listening to what they're not saying. You're listening to their body language and all those other things. But you're listening to what they're saying. You're listening to what God might be saying. And you're listening to what you are saying. Because sometimes when you're hearing things from others, it's triggering your own inner dialogue, right? You feel that happening? Where you start to go either, I relate to this because, or that happened to me, or that makes me really angry. And there are things happening within yourself as you listen. And so we do all of those pieces at one time. It's exhausting. But it's healing. It's healing. So Jesus was never on autopilot. I think this belongs in the listening category. When Jesus encountered people, he encountered them uniquely. So one example of this that I often go back to is in the story of his encounter with the rich young ruler, the Greek word for I think it says he looked at him. And the Greek word translates as he looked at him and loved him and said. So in this encounter, in this initial, before he has said anything, he has looked at this person and loved him, considered him. And he responds out of that place. That's a deep listening response. That's cool, eh? Yeah, Jesus wasn't on autopilot. Ask exceptional questions. So part of listening deeply is being able to ask questions that draw things out. And that can be hard. It can be hard to know what question to ask, what's going to actually get somebody talking. You know, you have those youth who answer everything with one word. It's impossible to really listen when somebody refuses to speak. So we have to learn how to ask good questions. I said exceptional. That's probably overdoing it. I stole that from Jake. Who's in Jake's? Yeah. You might have to practice. But good questions will draw out things that we want to hear about. And then no fish stories. Do you know what I mean by that? That's also a Jakeism. Anybody have an idea what I'm talking about here?
Don't exaggerate the truth.
Don't. Their story, then your story.
Exactly what you guys were doing in your sharing of my story.
Yeah. Where
somebody, well, I caught a fish this weekend and it was this big. Oh yeah? Well, I went fishing with my uncle and I caught a fish and it was this big. Where you're just always, you kind of get in this cycle, and you love to do that, right? They love to exaggerate. They love to make it sound more impressive than it is. When you get sucked into that, it's hard to listen deeply. And we know that often those kinds of stories, that kind of bravado, it comes from a place of pain. It comes from insecurity. It comes as that's what they're not saying. What they're not saying is, I really need you to think I'm cool. I really need you to think I'm valuable and worth your time. Those are the things they're not saying. So respond to those things.
I know you said don't counter stories like that, but what if you have a story that's very similar, not necessarily saying out of, well, my story is better, but I can relate, I've been there, this is how I got through it.
Yeah.
Is that something that's...
Yeah, I mean, so I think the key there is that you're not getting sucked into the competition of it. So if the competition isn't there, I absolutely think that there are that story is for me, and maybe here's how I dealt with it. I do think that in my experience of journeying closely with others, I've also had to learn how to discern when my story is or when my silence is more helpful than my story. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's a parallel story in my life, but it's actually better if I don't share it, because it leaves more room for that person to continue sharing with theirs. So it's not a right or wrong. It's a judgment call. It's a moment of discernment to say what's the best thing here. But absolutely, we need to be able to share. I mean, that's what the tie points are all about, right? Knowing when is a time to say, hey, like, I get it, you know? Yeah.
I struggle with that. I'm a bad listener. I speak a lot. And so someone came to me who, can share things with me. And I'm a superhero type guy in conversation. I want to immediately give you to resolve your problem.
Yeah.
And people don't want to do that. And I need to learn. Yes, I have a story for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just hurts people. Many people just want to be heard.
Yeah.
And me, if I'm just quiet, for me it's hard. My brain is jumping with popcorn. They probably see Steve in my ears, I'm shaking, in my hand, but I need to learn to just listen and love and not give answers to everything. There are people who ask for answers, and I go, then
Thank you for sharing
I know, right?
Because it is hard. It is very hard. And often the young people that we are in conversation with, because we have more life experience than them, there are usually 10 things we could tell them immediately that would make their situation better, right? You know what would help them. You know what would make a difference. You know the things that are going to impact for the good. But journeying soulfully, listening deeply, is not about you hit it right on. It's not just about solving problems for people. It's about leaving room for God to encounter them in the space that you are in. And what I have learned, and it's not the same for everybody, but certain people that I mentor, as I get to know them and as we have conversation, I realize with some of them that the silence seems long to me, but if I'm silent just a little bit longer than I think is necessary, they keep going. Some people just need a little bit more time, and they'll go deeper. So I appreciate that. I know it's a struggle, and that's why it's exhausting, because when you are dealing with all of that in your mind, it is, and then choosing to leave room. It takes lots of energy, for sure. Yeah, Josiah, do you want that?
I was just going to say, I've adopted the practice when my youth are talking to me about stuff like that. I sit down because I know I'm not going anywhere, and I'm telling my body I'm not going anywhere, and it causes me to actually sit and rest to know, okay, I need to listen because I'm understanding. I want to focus on doing things.
Okay.
But I sit down and I force myself to be still.
Yep.
And actually, one of my youth pointed out, they said, you're wanting to talk about something heavy. So what do you mean? I said, you're sitting down. They observed that. They said every time someone starts to talk to you, you sit down.
Yeah. That's a neat tip to try if you're finding it hard. Yeah.
So I'm a lot like you too, and I found something that really helps me is that I always want to relate and like tell my thing too, but I ask myself the question before I say it: am I loving or am I fixing? And that has actually really helped me to just shut up, because then I realize like I'm just trying to fix.
Because it feels better for us when we fix.
So maybe that'll help you if you're trying to do something.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard work, guys. The listening is hard work. that piece about undivided attention is also really important. So this is a great time to say, what are the distractions that keep you from being present? Phones are a big one. And I can tell you from personally how it works for me. If I'm talking with somebody and they pull out their phone, you won't get anything out of me.
Amen.
It goes away. It's not even that I don't want to anymore, it's just like it goes away because you're like, for whatever reason, it just doesn't feel safe anymore. It doesn't feel like you're there. And I think that youth can tell that too. I mean, they are on their phones all the time, so it doesn't go the other way around. That we still engage them when their phones are out, but yeah, the distractions. What will help you focus in? The other thing I wanted to say, Caitlin, about your comment is that this is also why it's so important to be caring for our own souls alongside of our ministry, because we need someone who will listen to us. We need a place where we can go and tell our stories. We need someone who will sit there and not interrupt us and who will leave space for us. So whether that's a mentor or a parent or a friend or a spouse or maybe it's a few of those kinds of people in your life, because we need places where we get to go and be safe and tell our stories, where we know we won't be interrupted or competed with or those kinds of things. Right? So that's a self-care. Go in the self-care column. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about what will you hear. So if we're really going to do this deep listening journey, we're really going to put the distractions aside. We're really going to bring our ear, our eyes, our heart, and our undivided attention. What are some of the things that we're going to hear?
Things they've never told anyone before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things that are underneath the surface, so that insecurities, the fears, the doubts. Yep.
Things that you don't understand immediately.
Yep. Things we don't understand immediately, yeah.
I think a lot of time answers to their own things they're sharing, you just like point it back to something that you previously said.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's their process, they're extroverting and they actually come to their own realization. Yeah. You're probably going to hear some things that are hard to hear. You're going to hear about traumas, broken families, addictions, those things maybe they've never told anyone. Yeah.
Sometimes they would look for you to speak. Probably the situation bring something that they want to speak about. But for example, I had this experience, but I couldn't see it. But and I started to yell at other guys, and I was there. And then I tried to say something, and then he told me many stuff. But after that, I couldn't hear what was behind that yelling.
Yeah.
I just hear the yelling. But after that, I talked with some teachers, and they told me that he was struggling with divorce of her parents, most divorce. That was his way of handling it. And sometimes we don't hear behind those situations.
Absolutely, yeah. It's actually not about what they're talking about, it's about something else. Yeah, I use the phrase sometimes, it's never about what it's about.
The thing behind the thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you hear it as anger or bitterness, or you hear it as, moaning about somebody in their family or this or that, but it's actually not about that thing. It's about the thing behind. Yeah, you're going to hear those things for sure.
It's quite possible that you'll actually hear something that you need to hear, or an answer to your own prayer, right? Because you can learn from those you need. And I think if we're actually actively listening to our friends or to the students that we lead, that oftentimes the Lord speaks through them also.
Yep. What is God saying for them, but what is also God might be saying for me. Yeah, so I think I wanted this question in here just because I recognize that to invite you to a lifestyle of deep listening means that you're going to hear heavy things. And you need to be aware of that, and you need to know where to go. So again, this is about self-care. Who do you debrief with? Where's a safe place to say, hey, you know what? I was talking to a youth today, and I heard some pretty heavy stuff, and I think I just need for somebody else to know that, so that I can sleep tonight. There needs to be a safe place for you to put that. Otherwise, it will build up. You know, we talk about things like vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue, and those are real things. So you need a plan to know what you're going to do with some of the stuff that you hear. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Are you guys okay for another 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah? I would prefer to keep going if we could. Okay. So, missional relationships. We're going to talk about hospitality, which we've already kind of, sort of touched on. Hospitality is one of those things that is not just about having lots of people over to your house. That is a form of hospitality. Hospitality, I really think, is a spirit. It's a spirit that says it's safe to be you around me. That's what hospitality is to me. And I'm about to switch to a slide that has a lot of words on it. And I will explain this. This is a quote from Henry Nouwen. When Henry Nouwen starts talking, you do not interrupt him. Because he always has more good to say, and you just let him go. So, I need someone who can channel their inner Henry. Who wants to read this for us?
I can give it a shot.
Okay, thanks.
In our world full of strangers, estranged from their own past, culture, and country, from their neighbors, friends, and family, from their deepest self and their God, we witness a painful search for a hospitable place where life can be lived without fear, where community can be found. We cannot change the world by a new plan, project, or idea. We cannot even change other people by our convictions, stories, advice, and proposals, but we can offer a space where people are encouraged to disarm themselves, to lay aside their occupations and preoccupations, and to listen with attention and care to the voices speaking in their own center. Just as we cannot force a plant to grow, but can take away the weeds and stones to prevent its development, so we cannot force anyone to such a personal and intimate change of heart, but we can offer the space where such a change can take place. Damn,
Right.
son. Sorry, that's awesome.
Henry. So this, some of you are looking forward, I know you're looking forward to it, to writing your credentials paper. And when I did it, one section asked for our philosophy of ministry. This is my philosophy of ministry. This is what my call is. To offer the space where such a change can take place. Hospitality is about creating safe space. I would say hospitality is about loving well. Somebody mentioned that. Loving, not fixing. Is that what you said, Caitlin? Yeah. Love well. I have in brackets there, not on. That's a quirk of mine. Sometimes people use the phrase love off. And if you are one of those people, you're welcome to continue using it. But I would just like to say for the record, loving on someone feels violent to me. Yes. And I don't think that's maybe your intention when you use that phrase. But I think that that hospitality, missional relationships, free story, it calls us to love well, but it calls us to love well with gentleness and dignity. Remember that word? To love well in a way that gives the person that you are loving the right to self-determination. I don't get to decide what you do with your life. It's not my decision. If you can do that while loving on, then I guess keep going. Hospitality is also always prepared. So Brett talked a little bit about this passage in Peter. I think it's important that we don't misquote this verse. So go back and read it over again, because there are some key parts in it that change how we live it out. Prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have is one of them. That's what we're preparing for. And there's also a part in there that says when someone asks, which is also part of that self-determination thing, which doesn't mean that we can't offer it when there's an opportunity. I think it's part of always being prepared. This is kind of our last section. So missional relationships. There's two phrases that have become important to me as I live out my calling. They are both from a training that I did down in Seattle with an organization called New Horizons Ministry that worked with street involved youth. Learn to love the clay, or farming in concrete. So these missional relationships that we're building with youth are often difficult. They're a process. Lots of them happen over periods of time. They don't happen in an instant. And journeying well with people is about embracing the process, embracing the place they're at, celebrating the things that we can in that moment, while we continue tending to the soil. Farming in concrete. Sometimes it feels like there's nowhere for anything to grow. So we're going to look at this parable from Matthew 13, the parable of the sower. I'm sure most of you know it. This parable, as far as I can tell, and we're going to look at it more for its imagery than for exegetical value today, because the imagery is really powerful. It's about the soil of the heart. And I had this experience, so early on in my radiation therapy career, I actually took a 3-month leave of absence, and I went and I worked at an orphanage in South Africa for 3 months. And I don't know what else to say except that I was compelled to do it. And it felt important. And so I got there. I actually had a minor panic attack when I got on the flight, because I realized that I was going to take care of babies for 3 months, and I was like, I don't know if I can take babies. So I don't know how this is going to go. But I got there, and as you can imagine, they stole my heart. And I also learned some things about that country, and I learned some things about the stories of these babies and where they had come from, and what their future held if nobody adopted them, things like that. And I remember that I just each week that went by, my heart got more invested, and it hurt more, and I was seeing more. And close to the end of my time, we had a water tower on our property that was kind of like a compound, like all fenced in and all secure and all that. So anyways, there wasn't a lot of places to go to get away. But we had a water tower, and I remember climbing that water tower one night, and you could kind of see over, there were fields kind of in every direction. There were squatter camps in the distance. There were fires going, and I saw this field, and it had been just plowed. Like just recently it had been, all the grass had been cut and had been completely plowed and ready for planting, I guess. And God said to me, I was wrecked. I was sad. I didn't know how I was going to leave to go home now that I was, invested here. And I just was asking God, like, what was all this for? Like, now I'm going to go home with a broken heart. Thanks a lot. And he said, "Do you see that field over there?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm tending to the soil of your heart. I made you ready for planting." you're ready to receive the seed that I have. And that trip, it changed my life. It changed the course of my life. So this parable is about the soil of the heart. He told many stories in the form of parables, such as this one. Listen, a farmer went out to plant some seeds. As he scattered them across his field, some seeds fell on a footpath and the birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seeds sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but the plants soon wilted under the hot sun. And since they didn't have deep roots, they died. Other seeds fell among thorns that grew up and choked out the tender plants. Still other seeds fell on fertile soil, and they produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. So my question to you is, what does farming really require? Especially when you feel like you're farming in concrete. My brother is a farmer. I grew up on a farm, and he's doing some vegetable farming. He runs a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture. He has some animals on his farm. The life of a farmer, I don't know if you know this, it's not an occupation, it's a lifestyle. Farming is a lifestyle. And my brother is good at it. He knows how to make things grow. He makes things grow that nobody else can in our family. And he's actually experienced a lot of healing through his life of farming. It has taught him many things about what he has control over and what he doesn't have control over. This is what I want to suggest to you, that farming, if we are going to be good tenders of soil, it will take patience, it will take knowledge. My brother knows a lot of things. He knows what the soil needs in order to produce. He knows how to tell what's missing from it based on what crops can grow. He knows what crops can grow next to each other and which ones need to be far apart. He knows how deep to plant each kind of seed into the soil. He knows when to water and when to wait. He knows how to prune and when. There is so much to know to farm well. Farming takes creativity. There are times when you are troubleshooting things and you don't know what's going to work. You don't know what's going to make the difference. So you bring your creativity. And the number one thing that farmers know is that in the end, God does it. In the end, the farmer goes to sleep and wakes up in the morning and goes to see what happened while they were away. I know that many of you are working with difficult youth where it feels like nothing is happening. It feels like there's no change. It feels like there might never be a change. And I want to implore you not to stop farming. Keep farming. Keep scattering seed. Keep tending soil in their hearts. Keep trusting God to do it. That's my brother's plot of land. All you can see is green. That's a good sign. I just want to tell you a quick story about, this is me and my cousin Derek. So a few years ago now, Derek got into some crazy behavior that led to 2 charges of aggravated assault. He spent some time in remand, and eventually got out on bail, but was picked up. He breached his conditions and was put back in jail. And this doesn't happen with everybody, not every kid, but for me, when I heard about it, it was like God just said, "This one's for you." So I journeyed with him, and I started going to visit him At the beginning, it was every 2 weeks while he was remanded. And that lasted for over a year. Yeah. So I would go visit him every 2 weeks, and then he got out on bail, and he was waiting for his trial, and that lasted maybe like a year and a half or something, and it was awful. And then he ended up pleading guilty, and he got sentenced to 2 years, and so he spent time in Stony Mountain Penitentiary, which is in Manitoba. It was about an hour drive from me, and I went every month and visited him. And I will tell you that I racked up hours and hours and hours and hours of garbage. I would go and I would sit. Those visiting hours at Stony were 3 hours long. And that's a lot of time. And I would sit and I would listen. And I would go every time saying, God, I know you're calling me to this, and I want to listen deeply. And I would listen to him spew garbage. I would listen to him spew entitlement and pride and bitterness. I would listen to him talk about how he hadn't done anything wrong, and if he had another chance, he would do it again, exactly the same. I listened to him, just the darkness. But I felt called to keep showing up. And the only thing that I kept doing the only thing that kept me going back, I think, is that at the end of every visit, they would announce, okay, visitor, visiting time is over, time to go. And there would be this 30-second window, because I would sit for 3 hours and probably not say much of anything, because he had a lot to say. And there was no soil ready. There was no soil ready. So I kept that, and at the end of every visit, there was about 30 seconds of saying goodbye, where I could look him in the eye and I could say, Derek, I love you, you're a good man, this place doesn't define you, I'm glad I came to visit, I'll see you next time. That was it. That was the extent of my evangelism. For years. And he got out eventually, and it didn't seem like much was going to change. He moved to a different city. I heard from him sporadically. He was still out partying. He was still doing the things that he was doing. And then maybe 2 years later, for no apparent reason that I could see, things turned around for him. He had a complete spiritual awakening. He absolutely, like the 180 that you dream of. And you know what? I wasn't there for it. It wasn't mine. But I got to journey with him. That was a gift. It was a gift to me. This is a picture at his baptism. I got to be there for his baptism. He's now launched his own ministry called Mission 7. He serves people on the street in Calgary. He's got a team of people. He's got a charitable status.
Wow.
The kid is it's unbelievable. And all I could do was, in his darkest moment, I showed up. And I listened. And then I told him who he was. He wasn't a good man in those moments. I know that he's a good man. I think this is what we're called to. I think that it doesn't go this way every time. I think that sometimes things happen faster. But hear me when I say, your journeying with the youth in your community matters. Don't give up on them. Don't give up on them if they are stuck in those stages of change. They are in pre-contemplation for the entire time that you know them. Don't give up on them. You don't know. You don't know where that seed is going to start to grow. It's a good calling you have. It gets tiring, but it's good. I love getting to be here with you guys. Thank you for letting me just blow right past the lunch time. Thank you for your attention. Please know that it is my greatest pleasure to be able to talk to my ministry partners about you. To know that you are on the front lines in the darkest places, having the hardest conversations with you around our country. Doing good work. Keep planting. Keep farming in concrete. I'm going to pray. God, thank you for giving us the energy to get through this. But thank you, Father, Son, and Spirit. Thank you for these youth workers. Thank you for the incredible gift of calling that you've given them. Thank you for giving them the heart and the vision to be where they are. Thank you for giving them the Holy Spirit that goes with them. Thank you for initiating in their lives so that they can grow in their intimacy with you and grow into maturity, conform to your image, Jesus. And I pray that you will give them grace and strength to live out the calling that you have placed on their lives, that you will give them the skill of listening. You will teach them to listen deeply, and that it will heal. And I pray this in Jesus' name.